there's always a way for us to get the audio back. So we'll do that then. Okay. All right, let's do this. All right, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Chris Allen, the owner of not really owner. I am the host of the Dynasty Owners Manual podcast. We've been on vacation for at least a couple of weeks. I have Adam's going through, switching jobs and all that, but we're still here for you guys, and we're here to bring you the content that you need and continuing the positional series that we've been working through. And we'll have Adam recap that here in just a second. But of course, I wanted to bring in our guest. And if you've seen any of the offensive line rankings and things of that nature, you've seen this man's work. He's been over at Pro Football Focus doing some charting for them. And then now recently he's been working with me over at 4for4 since for probably about a few months now. I forget how long it's been, Justin, but we're welcoming in Justin Edwards to the show today in order to talk to us about offensive lines, because to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, I think it's one of the misunderstood positions in football. I think our attention as fantasy owners, as fantasy managers, is really just to the skill position players, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and all those guys. But that really drives most of that production, what allows most of that production to happen, is offensive line. So that's why we've got you here tonight. Thanks for coming in. And how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be here. I had your guys' pod in my subscription feed since day one, so it's nice to finally be on it. Everything you said right there is exactly what I've been trying to pound home with my series for 4for4 over the last few months, is talking about how much these offensive linemen really mean to our fantasy football production.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. And I want to say that when it comes to just offensive production in general, for the most part, I mean, you've got your outliers, right? You've got your Deshaun Watsons, you've got your Russell Wilsons that, regardless of the offensive line play, they can kind of bend the offense to their will. But for a lot of guys, the older guys like the Tom Brady's, the Drew Brees, they really do need to have that front seven being the guys that protect them, that allow them to do the things that they do. And so in better understanding that, that's why we've got you in here. And so to kind of kick things off, of course, my partner in crime, Mr. Wildy. I think I might have butchered your name a couple of times the other night when I was talking to Mr. Dynasty Outhouse on the Trade Addicts podcast, but we had a little fun the other night in reminiscing or talking about our respective co-hosts. But tell the folks what they have in store for them tonight.
Never gets old. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Justin. This is one of the more exciting ones to talk about because it doesn't get talked about. So to recap, this is the 4th episode of our positional series. So we have talked wide receiver with Matt Harmon, quarterback with Mark Schofield, running back with Bob Long, and now we're talking about offensive line. We thought that would fit in nicely right behind running back because that's probably what it affects most, but you'll be telling us today. So it's really important for us to talk about this offensive line because we're not drafting offensive lines, but we're drafting people behind offensive lines. And we know, using all these stats that we talked about with Bob Long, that we're trying to isolate the good running backs regardless of their offensive lines. We go out of our way to do that. So shouldn't we also go out of our way to find the good offensive lines with the bad running backs, or maybe not as good running backs, because we have all these stats like yards after carry and how elusive is a running back, and those are all great, but it still seems like you need that offensive line. So let's jump into the philosophy of this thing. Should we start digging into individual blocking schemes and the coaches involved with these schemes more?
I don't know if we need to necessarily memorize team-by-team blocking schemes, but it is a very worthwhile endeavor to see if teams are drafting a fit to what they already have in place. Talking about like a zone running scheme or an outside zone running scheme. It's specifically, to take an example of Darrell Henderson, a big reason why I'm big on him is because he was deadly on outside zone rushes in college. He averaged nearly 11 yards per carry over the last 2 seasons. That's over a 53 attempt sample size, so pretty substantial there. Now he's going to the Rams, who ran the ball in outside zone 217 times in 2018, which is way, way more than any other team in the league. So that's such a good fit blocking scheme and running back there. or Buffalo, who's trying to do the same thing with Devin Singletary. They took him in the third round, even though they had LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore back there. I think a big reason behind that is they want him to learn that zone scheme even better behind those two veteran zone running backs who likely won't be there by next year.
Now, this is a question I want to ask a little bit off the show sheet just because it came to mind. So with Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, who really fits that mold better? And is there any way we can kind of identify who might get the run this year?
I mean, Lindsay fit it so well last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a question of fit or talent there. It's just he's such a tiny dude.
Mm-hmm.
I think he gets first run there, but how long can his body hold up? He's
short,
170 pounds, 165 pounds.
80s, but yeah,
some tiny.
He's small.
But I mean, I think he gets first run off the bat, and I mean, we're not really good at predicting injuries, so I would predict him to get injured. So I'd stick with him.
Yeah, I think so. I'm wondering though, just going back real quick to your point on Buffalo, is that we've got LaShawn McCoy, we've got Frank Gore, we've got TJ Yeldon, and now we've got Devin Singletary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we really think? I mean, this is a question to both of you guys. Do we really think that all four of those guys are going to make the team like going into the 2019 season? I mean, Singletary, I mean, he has to be a lock, right, based off of the draft capital that they spent. LaShawn McCoy, I would assume, based on his contract, like if they wanted to get out of it and just outright cut him to try and save money, they probably should have done that already.
They already took the larger hit.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. Yeah, it's possible for them to still recoup some money, but I think if they really wanted to go ahead and cut ties and and save some money, they should have done that already.
I think it was $6 million that they lost by not cutting him so far, so he's probably not going either.
Probably not going either. So you've got Frank Gore and then TJ Yeldon.
Both are super cheap.
Yeah,
right.
Gore is like a base salary is $1.25 million, so that's nothing in NFL.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering. Like,
probably carrying them.
Yeah, I'm wondering why they wound up. I guess maybe they didn't go into the draft thinking they'd be able to get Singletary, but at the same time,
or he's just a guy to him.
Yeah, but I'm hard pressed to believe they're going to enter the season with all four of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the four, like, do you think, like, which one do you guys think will wind up getting cut?
Well, Singletary was the third round, so unless he does something terrible this offseason, they're not going to cut the third round pick.
Yeah.
So I guess Yeldon or Gore.
So for me, it comes down to either Gore or Yeldon. Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it. So I'm just wondering, like, the whole, well, yeah, to me, that seems wild, but this is also the same team that wound up, like, going out and getting Cole Beasley and John Brown and like a bunch of redundant assets at like a wide receiver. So it's like, okay, fine.
The Redskins have been carrying four for a while too. I mean, I think it's wild, but teams do it.
Yeah.
I guess playing a lot of special teams this year.
Yeah, this is my like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory is that they'll just give Frank Gore just enough run to get to he'll make number 4 all-time rushing, and then just let him go. Like, I think he's like 500 yards, like 400 or 500 yards off of the next like all-time rusher. So just let him get like 400 or 500 yards. It might take like 6 or 7 games.
Yeah,
just let him do that. And then have him be done.
He's just going to chuck the deuces after the game.
Yeah, after that,
awesome.
at that point, who cares? I mean, he just like gets to that, and then he retires like at halftime. Like, who was it that did it last year?
Vontae Davis.
Yeah, just like, you know what, I'm done. Like I've paid my dues. I'm out of here, guys.
I think if you had to pick a Bills running back, I'd pick TJ Yeldon. He's probably the cheapest, and he's been the most productive, the most recent. So, sure. But I think you're throwing at a dartboard either way.
Yeah. I think in drafts, like, unfortunately, like, just based off of, like, price, I've been taking some stabs at TJ Yeldon just because I think, LaShawn McCoy is not going to make it. I don't think he's going to make it the entire season. Frank Gore, like, he is the inconvenient truth. So, but still, I do believe that after he gets, like, his all-time rusher record or makes it to the next level, then he just, then he pieces out. So then it just really leaves Singletary and Yeldon, and I don't know. It's just, I don't understand the Bills. I don't get it. They just don't make any sense.
The Bills don't understand the Bills.
That's probably true. That's probably true. But getting back to offensive lines and why we brought you in, Justin. So when it comes to, I guess when it just comes to the offensive line in general, as I was mentioning earlier in the intro, it's just one of those things that I don't think we forget about offensive lines, but it's not something that's in the forefront of our minds.
Yeah.
It's not like you can go out and start an offensive line in fantasy football, so it's not one that we consider. But during the games, it becomes a talking point. In analysis, it becomes a talking point. So what are the common misconceptions, or what are the things that we just don't tend to really think about when it comes to considering offensive lines that I guess are just things that or things that you've seen that just aren't, I guess, a common discussion point when it comes to talking about O-lines?
Yeah, I just think the amount of work that the offensive linemen do outside of just getting in front of someone, they're not just these big oafs getting in people's way. The things they have to do coming out of the huddle, trying to read the defensive personnel, pre-snap, piecing together the defensive formation, trying to figure out who's coming, who's about to back off into coverage, trying to take any subtle hints you can from the safety or a blitzing linebacker or whatever. And all this, they're half the time they're over in the 3-point stance. They don't have any sort of movement, and they're trying to read what personnel is on the field across the ball. Just getting off the ball as a unit, something that is really underrated on the road, especially if you're a road team. If you're Arizona going into Seattle, being able to get the snap count as a tackle when you can't see the ball, but your defender can see the ball, and you can't hear the quarterback. So you're already a half a step behind any edge rusher as a tackle, assuming you're playing a decent team, not a quiet stadium.
Right.
Well, the game gets more and more intricate. It becomes less and less common to know who you're actually blocking, to know if the guy is actually coming in, if they're going to drop into coverage or whatever. There's a laundry list of stunts and games the defensive front is going to pull on you, and it's something that's just overlooked.
And I guess because it just happens so quickly, because NFL play is over in 3 seconds, 4 seconds, or something like that. So all these things happen so quickly, it's hard for us to, I guess, really think about how quickly these guys have to process what they're seeing, how they're moving, and trying to defend against these safeties, linebackers, and trying to either get to the quarterback or stop the rusher and all that. So that's a huge point. I hadn't really, I guess, considered the things that were, because I guess once the ball is snapped, that's what we as fantasy managers, and we as just like fans of football, we're watching where the ball's going. Mm-hmm. We're watching where the quarterback is, where he's looking, or where the running back is trying to either bend, bang, bounce, to get through and make it to the next level. So, but really those guys, that's just, the in the trenches, those common phrases that we use for describing it, we just don't typically think about that.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so much in the 5 to 10 seconds leading up to the snap that we usually attribute to the quarterback, and the quarterback's doing a lot of hard work there too, but typically it's the center that's calling out blitz formations, and when you hear them yelling about the mic or whatever, they're trying to find who the middle linebacker is, what gap they might be coming through. That's all the offensive line.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to actually take a second and look at the offensive line on some plays. I know it's very difficult. I played offensive line in high school, did a lot of film once I got to varsity. I think it's fun to watch. Some people are just like, I'm going to watch the ball. I'm going to watch what gives my fantasy team points, but that's what we're here. That's the point we're here to make. These guys are getting your fantasy team points. And actually, my brother played in a fantasy league where you could draft offensive lines. You started 2 offensive lines a week, and you had head coaches as well. So here, when it comes to fantasy, why do we care about offensive line in terms of fantasy points by position? Kind of sell us on why it matters for the quarterback, the receivers, the running back.
Yeah, absolutely. Simply, if the offensive line can't do their job, our fantasy points are going to stay real close to 0. Fundamental parts of the play depend on an offensive line's strength, quickness, awareness, ability to identify who's blitzing, who is looping to catch you off guard, kill the quarterback. Clearly sacks are terrible for everyone involved in the play. So that's number one. I look at sack rate, I look at QB hits allowed. when I'm looking at numbers first and foremost, when I'm trying to judge how good an offensive line has done metrically. There's been a lot of studies on, I mean, there's not a quarterback in the league who has a better QBR when under pressure than when clean. So simply put, if you're putting pressure on the quarterback, you're lowering the completion percentage. That's going to kill your wide receiver and your tight end. Being able to get explosive runs out of your running back. I mean, it'll happen on broken plays sometimes, but that's usually what you're seeing in college. You don't see a lot of broken plays go for long rushes in the NFL, unless it's the quarterback scrambling or it's Russell Wilson, who we'll talk about later. But typically a running back's not going to go very far if the defense is blowing up your offensive line. If they're able to set that edge, even the quick scat backs aren't going anywhere either. And that's typically when those scat backs are losing yardage because they can't get around the edge. And when you have a crappy offensive line, it usually keeps your tight end right up in the line, so you don't get to see
blocking.
Yeah, exactly. They have to block and help out their crappy offensive tackles. So you'll see David Njoku helping out the Browns' not so great tackles and not lining up in the slot or out wide anymore. So it really affects everyone in the offense.
And we saw a lot of blocking out of Rob Gronkowski. He's always been a great blocker, an elite blocker, but it seemed like he was blocking a lot more last year. And it seems like maybe looking back, that might have been a little bit of a sign of what was to come. I also think it's really interesting to add that you said you don't really see a lot of broken plays go for any sort of gain, which is why we try so hard to isolate the good running backs with things like I alluded to earlier with yards after contact, elusiveness ratings, and that's all great. But we also have to remind ourselves that you're not going to go very far on a broken play. And Nick Chubb has great yards after contact. He's a really good running back, but when the Browns' offensive line isn't clicking, he's still not going to be productive regardless of how good it is. It's a simple numbers game at that point. It's 1 against 11, and if you don't have 6 severe guys helping you out, you're not really going to proceed. So that was a great point to make, is that maybe we spend less time trying to figure out the running backs that are doing it themselves and more time trying to figure out, say Todd Gurley, he's an amazing running back, historically good, right? But if you watch some of the games last year, there's holes you could have drove a Mack truck through. Now, that's not a knock on Gurley, right? But that means that we got an amazing running back, but also an amazing situation, which is why he was on pace for historic fantasy points before, getting injured.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And most running backs that we consider to be great also happen to have a really good offensive line.
Sure.
And I think that correlation is usually pretty easy to understand. If you're a great running back, but there's no holes, you're just a normal running back. You're just average.
Right. And I think that, to add to the comedic level that we see on Twitter of the running backs don't matter argument. I mean, some of the work that the tweet threads that Ben Baldwin has put together, kind of highlighting the offensive line play. It's twofold, right? It's one, to highlight, that these running backs, like, while they can be quote unquote like generational talents, they're not doing it on their own. In some cases, they do have these, 3 to 4 yard wide gaps that they can run through in order to make some of these explosive plays that we see. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of the offensive line. That's a function of the offensive line. Now, in some cases, you might have a Saquon Barkley or Todd Gurley in some cases where they are able to create on their own, but there's a symbiotic relationship between those two positions, between the running back and the offensive line, where you have to take them both into account. It's not just all of the running back's talent. Of course, some of them, they have to have the vision in order to see the gap and see the hole and run through it. I mean, they're not all Trent Richardson where they have the gap on one side, but they try to run into like their 4 to 5 offensive linemen to the left.
Isaiah Crowell,
exactly. I mean, they don't all function that way. So there's some credit that we have to assign to the running back because they're the ones that are running the damn ball. But there also has to be some credit assigned to the offensive line that make the holes available for them to run through, that make the lanes available for them to run through. So it's just, there's a balance. There's always a balance that we have to take into account when we're looking at that type of production.
For sure.
I got into a real live running backs don't matter conversation yesterday, and it was terrible. It was everything you ever thought it would be. I hated it. My wife asked me how I like nights. I said, yeah, I like the people. I like the shift, everything. I just have to make sure not to argue with these two dudes about fantasy football. She's like, that's not going to happen. I was like, no, I can do it. I'm just not going to pay attention when they talk about it. Someone started talking about football yesterday, and I laid into them about how bad running backs don't matter. And that's a philosophy that blows people's minds. They're like, what do you mean running backs don't matter? There's Adrian Peterson. You know, I'm like, okay, there's Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
It don't matter.
Like, oh, yeah, what about Barry Sanders? Like,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 25 years ago. You're right.
Yes,
Yeah.
they mattered.
Barry
then,
Sanders was amazing.
right?
It used to matter.
Right. But who was the guy that was, running through open lanes for the Rams during the playoffs? Was that Todd Gurley?
No, that was C.J. Anderson. That's why I told him.
Yeah. That's just, for me, it's wild because you can see, we all know both sides of that argument. We've seen actual, the generational talents come through. We've watched them play. Or you can go back and look at some of the highlights of any of the, I guess the greats, like the really good running backs, we were just talking about Barry Sanders. Any of those guys, Dickerson, so on and so forth. But at the same time, again, we know that there's some, they're not always able to create on their own. There has to be some lanes for them to run through. There has to be some sort of ability on the offensive line to create for them, or at least to give them that little edge so that they can continue to create after that. And I think that's why a lot of the metrics that folks like Football Outsiders have put together, where you now are able to assign some credit to the offensive line, so you can see that interaction. You can see that you can assign some credit to the offensive line for what they're able to do for the push, or for the amount of space they're able to give the running back, or the amount of time that they're able to give the quarterback, so that they do have the ability to read all of the receivers' routes and see what the coverage is and all that. So if we know that, let's say, guys like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, the older guys, the less mobile guys, they need to have that time. If we know that year over year they're going to be these perennial, top 12 quarterbacks, well, it's not because they're scrambling and running for 200 to 300 or 400 yards over the entire season. We know that because they have the time in order to process what they see on the field, and that's because of the offensive line. So, offensive line is not just about rushing production. It's also about the time that it affords the quarterback to look across the field, see, for Tom Brady, it's Julian Edelman, sprinting across the middle of the field, or Gronkowski going up the seam, or, something like that, where it's just, we focus on the person with the ball. We don't really attribute that time that they have to the 6 or 7 guys that are involved in essentially car collisions, up in front of them on a daily, for 60, 70 plays, each and every Sunday, or Thursday, I guess, or Monday night.
Yeah. Or Wednesday or Saturday. Or
I know, as whatever as the league would have it. They would probably have them playing on Friday nights, and then, Wednesdays and all that.
Yeah.
With no buys.
No buys.
I tried to explain to this dude, I said, yes, there are good running backs. The running backs don't matter movement is not to say that there are not good running backs.
Right.
It's to say that Todd Gurley is really good and Kareem Hunt's really good. But then Damian Williams was good. Then C.J. Anderson was good. And then Matt Breida was really good. So the point is, why do you pay them? That's what they could not grasp. You do not pay them. That's why when crazy Adam Gase takes over, the first thing he wants to do is trade Le'Veon Bell, because it drove them nuts. They spent all that money on a running back when, frankly, Elijah McGuire probably would have been similar in fantasy.
Right. And I think that's the thing that most folks can't wrap their minds around, is that it's not to say that the running back talent is what we're devaluing. It's the amount of money that you pay them. It's just if that talent is replaceable on a weekly basis, then why are we giving them, or why are they being given these massive contracts and affecting the cap so much that you can't really invest in the positions that really do affect the outcome of games? Where having a good offensive line like we're talking about right now is useful, or having a good defense, or a good edge rusher, players or positions that really affect the game. And if you don't have the ability to invest in those positions because you're now paying a running back, they're on a $50 million contract, it makes it impossible for you to really invest in that. And so,
Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys. That's
going to invest in Zeke. They can't, right? I mean,
that's going to be hard.
This is a prime example of running backs don't matter, and we get to see it live, and it's going to be awesome because they're going to sign Dak and they're going to sign Amari, and Zeke's going to walk, and all these fans' minds are going to blow because they're like, Zeke gets 1 trillion yards and 1 trillion touchdowns. It's like he also gets suspended, and Rod Smith also does similarly well, or Alfred Morris. So it's going to turn the whole thing upside down.
Tony Pollard is about to get a 1,500-yard season, 2020.
Yep. Pretty much. So go pick him up on all your dynasty squads right now. But speaking of that, I mean, those are the things that we really want to figure out is like which teams, I guess, should we be concerned about some teams because of either their offensive lines or because of just the way that their team is structured. Like if it's not for it being, running back dependent as we've been focusing on right now, but should we worry about the offensive line for the person, for the guy under center? So as I mentioned earlier, so like the older quarterbacks, so the Drew Brees of the world, the Phillip Rivers, the Tom Brady's, I mean, even I guess Ben Roethlisberger for sure, and I guess Matt Ryan to some degree as he's kind of getting up there as well. So are there some teams with some of those poor, weaker offensive lines that we really have to worry about, or for in some cases like Houston and Seattle where you have those guys, the still relatively mobile quarterbacks that we really shouldn't care at all about them?
Yeah, I think absolutely, and on both cases, honestly, some of them we should worry about, and some of them we shouldn't. In terms of all the older gentlemen that you named, they all have top 10, at least top 15 lines. So they're investing in their linemen, knowing that they have an aging commodity that they'd like to keep behind there for the next 3 or 4 years. Houston and Seattle are not in that same boat, at least not in their pass protection. But I think if anyone is uniquely qualified to not get murdered by the defense, it's Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Just looking at their pressure scrambles, so how many scrambles they had or chose to go out in the last few years because of pressure. Russell Wilson's landed 3rd, 1st, and 7th most scrambles in the last 3 seasons. He was 7th last year, and Tom Cable left the year before, so some sort of correlation going on there.
Yeah, don't know how that worked out.
Yeah, right? That's weird. Protection got better when Tom Cable left. But and then last year, Deshaun Watson led the league with 22 pressure scrambles. Having his little bit of injury history, I'd be more concerned about him. The Texans did get a couple dudes in the first 2 rounds that went with 2 small school guys for whatever reason. They did get jumped over for someone at the 17 spot. Dalton,
I forget who, but isn't that pretty much why Houston wound up canning their GM almost immediately after the draft?
Probably, yeah. Yeah. So I'd be a little worried about Deshaun. I mean, I would be worried about Russell Wilson if he hadn't shown that he could still produce for the last 7 years. I don't know how he does it. He's just a madman. But yeah, Josh Rosen is leaving one bad situation and going to another bad situation. So I don't know if we'll ever see what Josh Rosen could be, because if he fails in Miami too, I mean, I don't know if the 3rd team is going to pay a 2nd-round pick to grab him. The Arizona Cardinals offensive line is still terrible, but they could scheme away from that. It's interesting that Texas Tech had 1 offensive lineman drafted in the last decade, and they allowed the 4th lowest sack rate in Division I football. So they didn't have any good offensive linemen, and they still were doing just fine. So I guess that's a plus for Kyler, because that offensive line is still not good, but maybe he'll be all right.
It's interesting that they're going to have to move towards a quicker scheme in the first year, which is kind of something that puts me on Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella the most. Of course, draft capital gets you off Hakeem Butler a little bit, but I think this offense is going to have to be built around speed the first year, because you're right. I think he really had to sit down with himself and say, am I going to build my air raid offense this year, or am I going to build my offensive line? And I think he might have done the right thing by getting all those wide receivers, because if he built his offensive line this year, he wouldn't have been able to do everything that he needs to do with the air raid offense. So if you put Kyler in a watered down air raid offense in his first year because you drafted offensive linemen, and now you don't have the receivers on the outside that really are that really fit your air raid, then that might have stunted him a little. So I think we might see in year 2, I mean, if they're being smart, a huge offensive line boost if some of these receivers hit. So hopefully they just get rid of the ball quick. I think that's what Kyler's going to be really good at. Is he's smart. He's a smart dude. I think that he's going to get rid of the ball quickly or scramble. They're going to have to move the pocket. But you're absolutely right. That offensive line did not get any better. So with the new out of Cincinnati them at all, because I was really excited with the new head coach coming in, and I think Andy Dalton's a little better than people give him credit for. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of stoked, just being a Cincinnati fan in general, to have a left tackle that we could put there that was going to start learning. I mean, he already had good numbers in college. See if any of that translates. But at this point, I don't really see Cincinnati any different than the ceiling of 2018. They still got Bobby Hart at the right tackle. They paid him for literally no reason because he's large. So I don't know if I'm fading Cincinnati, but I think the numbers that they put up last year are going to be the ceiling. I'm not as excited about Mixon as I was a month or two ago. Mm-hmm. We've seen Dalton be mediocre to awful behind a not very good offensive line. He hasn't put up good numbers since they let Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler leave. Again, pretty questionable that they wouldn't pay them, and now they're paying Bobby Hart. But I don't know that I'm fading the whole offense. I'm just not as stoked. I know I've seen AJ Green going in the 4th round now. I think that's a mistake.
Later than that, man. I've seen him in Scott Fishbowl. I've seen him go 4th or 5th. Yeah.
That's silly. It's too late. Like, I'm not excited about the Bengals offense, but come on.
It's AJ Green.
Come on.
It's AJ Green. Come on.
I know he's 30 or 30 in a 10th or whatever, but come on. He's not done yet.
Yeah. And to add, just the news out of Cincinnati is that they lost their 1st-round left tackle.
Oh, yeah. I probably should have mentioned that.
Yeah. Was it labrum surgery?
Yeah.
Torn labrum or something like that.
And gone for the season. Hopefully back by next.
Yeah. So just continuing the curse of 1st-round picks for Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Whether it's
they're adding up.
Yeah. I mean, it's John Brown, or what was it? Abuehi, or a couple years ago, and
John
then
Ross.
Yeah, John Ross, and it's just
man, that's depressing. But they don't have a team anymore. But let's talk about my old team real quick, because the Washington Redskins offensive line has been on paper top 5 for the past few years, but when it comes to actually playing, they don't. So on film, they're bad. They were taking guys almost literally off the street last year. So what's up with the Washington Redskins offensive line health, and how are they going to do this year?
I mean, at this point, they seem healthy. Seems like they have everyone in place, except for Trent Williams, who is healthy, but is demanding a trade, which is not something you see from an offensive lineman too often. That's usually a running back, wide receiver, diva move. But Trent Williams doesn't want to be in Washington anymore. Their health last year was just miserable. They started 11 dudes across the offensive line. 9 linemen played over 200 snaps. It's real hard to build chemistry or strengthen the base of your teammates when you don't know who you're playing next to day in and day out. I mean, if everyone's healthy and no one gets traded, they have a lot of really good pieces on there, including Williams, assuming he's coming back. 7 straight Pro Bowls. Chase Roullier, that's how you pronounce that, right? Roullier?
Yeah, I think so.
And then that's their center. And then the right guard, Brandon Schriff, has been
he's a beast,
rock solid since being drafted in 2015. I mean, if everything goes right, this could seriously be a top 5 offensive line in the league. But who knows if everything's going to be there. It's just weird to have someone holding out on the line. I can't think of another time that I've seen that.
I don't blame them though. They've definitely treated his contracts poorly. But this leads me to talk about something else. I know I spent way too much time on Darius Geis in my life, but so I took him way too early in Scott Fishbowl. Let's get that off my chest right now. Way too early. I did not realize he would still be there in the 7th or 8th. I took him at 5:02. But I think the Trent Williams thing has to do a little bit with that because it is going to be a big difference if Trent Williams leaves. He's a top left tackle, sometimes the best left tackle in the league. It is going to be a big difference. So the situation does look muddy. Trent Williams leaves. They bring back Adrian Peterson, blah, blah, blah. It looks muddy right now. But couldn't you see in the second month of the NFL saying, how on earth would this guy not going in the 3rd round? I mean, if Trent Williams was staying and we didn't worry about Adrian Peterson, he'd have to be a lock for the 3rd round, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, a lead back on a team with a top 5 offensive line, like put those pieces together. Yeah, that's a 3rd round pick any day of the week.
Yeah, so I mean, it has to work out that way, of course. And I'm the Darius Geis truther, so somebody else without bias jump into here. But I mean, we're gonna look at this guy. If he took over the offense, and I'm not sure he does, to be honest with you, because Jay Gruden's not super smart. So I could see Adrian Peterson getting way too much run. But if he comes out and looks as electric as we know he can be, why do you give Adrian Peterson the ball? Same thing happened with Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara was a huge surprise, and then they had to look at Adrian Peterson and say, hey, sorry, dude. I mean, we have to give this guy the ball. And Adrian Peterson wasn't washed because he came out last year and he still produced. So we're talking about offensive line here. If we're going to say that we have a top 5 offensive line where I like I said, the last 3 years, they should have been a top 5 offensive line. It's been injury, and they've got everyone intact again. Then you're getting a running back that could be a bell cow, that could be behind a top 5 offensive line. Yeah, it's volatile, but if you guys are actually going to get him in the 7th, when I took him in the 5th, that's a huge steal, man.
Well, you got to embrace that volatility too. It's something that I really learned hearing you guys talk about it over the last year or so. You need to inject some risk into your team, especially if it's coming in the 7th round. And I mean, what's the worst that happens? You spend your 7th round pick, and Geis somehow never sees the field again. It's a 7th round pick. Who cares?
Sure.
Especially in something like Scott Fishbowl or in a best ball league where you're looking for the highest ceiling play you can anyways, since SFB has 1,200 teams in it. Like, you have to have some sort of risk in your team, or you're just going to end up 500, and that's not going to do you any good.
Yeah, exactly.
I ended up going undefeated last year, and I was starting Adam Humphries. I started Matt Braid all year. Got lucky with John Connor, but that's what you have to do in Scott Fishbowl. So I've been going all volatility this year because the only way you win with 1,200 people is to have like 3 or 4 random dudes hit. And like you discussed on the volatility before we get to this film section, if you take those volatile players, you can just take their backups later. Like his floor is still going to be productive. He's not going to not see the field. It might be a 50-50 if Jay Gruden wants to continue being stupid, but if it is 50-50, you still have production in the 7th. But you can also get Adrian Peterson later. So if it's what's more likely, which is Adrian Peterson plays the first 2 games, he got hurt every other game last year, by the way. So you're at least going to get every other game of Darius Geis being a workhorse. How many times does Darius Geis have to be the every other game workhorse before he's just the workhorse?
Yeah,
we'll see. But take your Adrian Peterson or take your Chris Thompson if you think that his workload's going to increase when one of these guys goes down. That's what we do. That's what I've always done with Jarvis Landry. I take that volatile wide receiver way too late because people are afraid to take him. That's your Allen Robinson this year. And just take a dude like Jarvis Landry that's going to get your solid 12 every week, but then sometimes he'll get you your 20. That's how you embrace volatility in this thing.
Yeah, I think so. And when it comes to, I guess, just talking specifically about the Washington offensive line, I think that, yeah, if you think that they're going to come back healthy, because I think towards the end of last year, so they already had a ton of injuries on that offensive line to the point where, I mean, you had not Jordan Reed, his Vernon Davis was actually like being asked to block like quite a bit in order to keep that continuity on the line, because he understood like most of the blocking schemes because he's been in the league for so long. But if you do have some of that continuity now, or you have some of those guys coming back, and actually with the new guys that they've actually been able to draft, I think that you'll be able to see that that offense be able to, I guess, to turn it around a little bit. I mean, I don't think they'll be able to get back to where they were maybe a couple seasons ago, but at least become something that's stable. So if you already have a new rookie quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, you're going to need an offensive, like you're going to need a talented running back like at his side in order to kind of, kickstart his career as well. And not to say that Adrian Peterson couldn't do that, but stylistically speaking, wouldn't you want a running back there that can do pretty much a little bit of everything? And I think that speaks more to Derrius Guice than it does to Adrian Peterson. So I think there's more to it than just saying that, Derrius Guice can shoulder that load, because it's more than just the running back situation in Washington. You've got a new quarterback, you've got new receivers, you've got more talent on the offensive line. And so I think Derrius Guice as a piece, I think he is one of those, dynamic running backs that you could probably, you could put him in as an all-purpose back, or at least he can become that all-purpose back. But in the context of that offense, he's the guy that you need in order to step forward and make that offense run. So I'm hoping that that's the case. I actually had the chance to talk with Wes Martin, the guard that they drafted in the 4th round or 5th round. I talked to him actually last month, like shortly before he left for a rookie training camp, because he's from West Milton, so a city that's just a town outside of Dayton. And since he's from the area, he knew like a mutual friend, so we started talking and whatever. And great guy. And he was talking about going and meeting Flowers and Brandon Sheriff. I forget the last name or how to pronounce it correctly. But starting to talking with those guys and just learning how to, I guess, integrate into like the pro style type offense. So coming from Indiana and working from there into the pros, you're just saying it's different. I mean, you're starting to learn more about blocking schemes that, while a lot of it, the stuff they learn in college is something that you can transition, there's just nuance to it and things that you pick up along the way. So I'm hoping that that's something that we'll see or be able to see once they all get out on the field. But I guess my last question before we get into, I guess, the film discussion. So we're talking about just Washington in general, but let's talk about one of the better offensive lines. So we've got the LA Rams and the Saints, but both of them have kind of sustained some losses. I mean, the Saints, they lost Max Unger, he's retired. And then for the LA Rams, I think it was Saffold they lost. And I thought they lost one of their other interior offensive linemen, but I could be mistaken. But those losses enough? Are they big enough that we should be concerned about the offense in general? Or do you think that they have enough talent behind them that you're not too concerned about them at all?
Start with New Orleans because I think it's a kind of quick one. I'm not too concerned about Nick Easton plugging in there for Max Unger. Unger had a couple of down, not bad years, but for his standard, a couple of down years anyways. So him moving on and them inking Nick Easton from the Vikings, it's not that big of a deal. I think they'll continue on pretty well there. All their main pieces are still healthy and they're still ready to go. LA, I'm more concerned about. They still have their tackles, which is good. It's hard to have two average, let alone two great tackles at the same time. They've got Whitworth and Rob Havenstein, I believe. Okay. But they lost Roger Saffold and John Sullivan. Whitworth almost retired at the end of the year, which would have been terrible. That would have been a huge detriment to the Rams' offensive line and just their offense in general. That's a lot of experience and a lot of strength to lose from your offensive line. The Saffold one is pretty big. Saffold was a great guard last year. He's been a great guard his whole career. They've got Brian Allen plugging in for him, a 4th rounder from last year. So we'll see there. Filling John Sullivan's shoes at center is probably the easier thing to do. He didn't have a very great year last year. I'm a little bit worried about the Rams. The Cowboys, kind of the same thing along the lines of Washington, is they have a great offensive line. They just have a lot of injuries. Travis Frederick missed 2018 with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is also something I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
He was going numb in all of his extremities, and he was starting to lose his nerves, so he couldn't feel anything. So he didn't play last year because that seems pretty serious. Apparently he's fine now, though. So, all right.
I didn't know that was something you could just quickly recover from.
It just takes 12 months of recovery, I guess. I guess he's fine. We'll see. He's slated to start, and if he's back to normal, that'll be a big boon to them. And then Tyron Smith was injured last year, but he's been injured all the last 3 years, so there's not really anything different there. Anything different there. So the Cowboys are kind of intact, but kind of not. Kind of along the lines of the Redskins.
So I'm wondering, I guess, and I remember actually with Tyron Smith that people were running, I guess he was missing enough games that people were starting to look at his splits, like Dak's splits, like in and out, and also the same thing for Zeke as well. Like how missing such an important part of that line, because he's there, it was left guard or tackle, I forget.
Left tackle, yeah. Left tackle. The splits are pretty extreme with him in and out. The yardage it's like actually a perfect 8-game sample, or it was taken when there was a perfect 8-game sample of him out. The yardage was like 21 yards a game different, which is not a big deal, but their scoring offense was a full 6 points less.
Oh, wow.
Every game that he missed. So if extrapolated over 16 games, it would be 16 less touchdowns for the offense.
Yeah.
If Tyron Smith were to miss an entire year.
That's huge. I didn't know it was that significant.
Tackle accounting for a touchdown a game. That's crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's some good war there.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, that's a perfect, like, if his agent should just take like a picture of that RotoViz like split and just take that into negotiations to be like, pay him.
Yeah,
like lift this and then pay him this.
Yeah, this is how many games that you guys lost by less than 6 points when he wasn't playing. Oh man.
Yeah,
your agent right now.
Pay my client right now.
You guys would have been 15-1.
Exactly. But I guess
it's going to say, yeah, but you're injured all the time, and he's going to say, oh, I didn't.
Oh yeah, it's like, oh crap. All right, so
good point.
Well, just give us like half of what we're asking for, then we'll be good. We'll leave you guys alone. But the last part that we want to do is kind of the segue into, I guess, the film discussion is that, I mean, for some of these offensive lines, I mean, again, we're what we've covered so far is one, the interaction, like the slow motion, like if you take a play and look at it kind of, piece by piece as you see these players go, we want to focus in on the offensive line and the things that are happening. And so just to kind of start us off, we wanted to look at the Rams first and foremost, because when it comes to Todd Gurley, or whether it was Todd Gurley or whether it was CJ Anderson, I mean, one of their big thing was that they were able to have these like wide open rushing lanes for either of them to run through. Now we want to see the same thing for Darrell Henderson, but with the losses that we were just discussing on the offensive line, I guess you do have some concern about whether or not we'll be able to see plays like we're seeing now with Todd Gurley. The splits that, like the split for the lane that he's able to run through, it almost looks like it's 5 yards wide.
Yeah.
So I guess talk to us about like what you're expecting to see now in 2019, I guess, with some of the, changes that they're going to have to make on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that pops out at me is Whitworth, who is sticking around. He just allows Kerry Hyder's momentum to just drop himself to the ground about a half a second after the ball is snapped. He's just face down on the ground.
Right.
Pretty hilarious. And then he moves to the second level here and seals off this safety, which takes the backside of the hole and pushes it even wider than it already was. And then right next to Whitworth at the beginning of this play is Saffold, who did move, who had such an incredible year last year. He sees he's got no one to block on the line, so he goes immediately out to the second level, takes care of Van Der Esch, number 55 here, and just seals off the front side. So between Whitworth and Saffold, that is where that gargantuan hole comes from, and it just leaves Gurley with this free safety to beat, and he does an easy job of that, just getting to the outside. So some of this is Gurley. He beats that free safety, but really Gurley didn't have to do anything until he was 9 yards down the field.
And Whitworth was still blocking 9 yards down the field.
Exactly.
So we understand you guys can't see this, but we're talking through the film of Todd Gurley breaking a long touchdown. And this is a perfect example of why Whitworth was so important to that offense, because that first guy was not Whitworth's responsibility. And you see Higbee pulling on the backside. He would have taken that guy. But Whitworth, being so savvy, takes this guy to the ground, moves to the next level. The person who was supposed to tackle Todd Gurley is who Whitworth is blocking, probably 10 yards down the field. So Todd Gurley doesn't get touched until 10 yards down the field, and that's because Whitworth takes a guy to the ground who wasn't even his responsibility, gets on his responsibility, blocks him 10 yards down the field, and then you got Todd Gurley one-on-one against the safety, which is on every running play what you want. You're trying to get, because there's 11 players and you have a quarterback, which means the safety's supposed to make the tackle every perfectly blocked play, or most. So you have an amazing Todd Gurley, but what did he have to do in this play? You had to be fast. The hole was 5 yards wide. Whitworth did so much extra in this one play, and then he's blocking 10 yards down the field, so the guy who's supposed to tackle him just can't get to him. It's amazing to me how we can take you saying Whitworth's important to a team and then come look at it and be like, oh my God, this guy just made this whole play. But all you're going to see on ESPN is Todd Gurley scoring a 40-yard touchdown.
It's a perfect clip to personify that.
Yeah, and sometimes that's unfortunately, that as I was making the point earlier, that's sometimes like all that we focus on, because as fantasy owners, as dynasty managers, that's all that we see. That's all that we really care about, are the things that, once the ball is in motion, that's what we're tracking. So moving on, I mean, we're not just concerned with rushing production.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the big things when it comes to offensive line, is how the running back is able to move either, through the line and up to the next level. And Todd Gurley was a great example of that. But looking on the other side, or I guess on the same side, is that how does the quarterback actually, how are they able to work within that system? And so looking at, the same team and looking at what Jared Goff was able to do, I guess for the most part, until they got to the Super Bowl. I mean, talk to us about, I guess, the importance of the offensive line when it comes to the quarterback, and in this specific case, the Rams.
Absolutely. This clip makes me a little sad because of my love for Darrell Henderson. But John Kelly has this phenomenal blitz pickup in this clip.
Oh, that was John Kelly. I completely forgot about him.
That makes me sad.
Yeah.
I was hoping he would not see the field this year. But you see, he's supposed to be faking the handoff, but his head swivels and he sees this dude, Reddick, come through completely untouched, because their right guard, Austin Blythe, is supposed to be pulling and grabbing him, but he's never going to get there in time. So that starts it off. But you see, as the play progresses and Goff rolls to his right, the entire offensive line is turning their defensive line counterparts towards the left sideline of the offense. So they're turning all of them and trying to push him that way. So Goff has this clean field of vision here, where he's got no one but this 36 here. So he can see all of his three wide receivers all flooding over to the right sideline. He's able to drop this dime right there.
Yeah, he connects with Bobby Woods.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, I could have thrown to all three of them too.
Yeah. Here, someone get this. But the fact that they can turn everybody away, so they have no momentum carrying him to Goff, and Goff has just nothing to worry about. Like, all of their helmets are turned. They're never going to make a straight pass at him. And then he has all this space.
And this is kind of what we'll have to see a lot of with Kyler Murray this year, is that play action and move in the pocket. And obviously Kyler Murray is going to be a lot better at it than Jared Goff, but that's promising, because Sean McVay definitely schemes his offense regardless of player ability. He kind of makes the players, in my opinion. So if we can see Arizona move the pocket like this and get some play action, get some quick slants, I think that they'll be just all right without without having a great offensive line.
Yeah, they're going to be just an exceptional case study. I can't wait to see. Like, I hope they do well, because it makes football more interesting. I just can't wait. It's going to be great, or not so much. I'm hoping for the former.
I can't help but be a pessimist and think on week one we're just going to look at it and be like,
Uh-oh.
Sean McVay, it's not gonna work anymore. I'm hoping that is not the case, because I do think with the way that they were able to quickly take over the NFL and become one of these like massive powerhouse franchises, I'm hoping they're able to maintain that. But just a quick question for you, Justin. So what I've been hearing, or at least a narrative that I've heard, is that with the losses on the offensive line, there's a chance that they wind up moving to 2 tight end sets a little bit more. So they wind up using, because Tyler Higbee, we know, is a good blocker, and he can be pulled in more, and then they could also bring in Gerald Everett as well. So is there any credence to the idea that instead of trying to, I guess the way that they could plug up some of the holes on their offensive line is to now bring in, so you have Everett and Higbee on the field at the same time. And because Everett is he's more of a move tight end than a blocker, that will wind up decreasing the amount of snaps for somebody like Robert Woods, who traditionally plays in the slot, because the slot, or at least the big slot role, would be for somebody like Cooper Kupp, because he offers more tactical value. So if you have Brandon Cooks and Josh Reynolds on the outside, that kind of bumps Robert Woods to the bench, because you need some of the players that I was just listing out, like the Cooper Kupps, the Gerald Everetts, and the Tyler Higbee's those bigger guys that you would need to have on the field in order to block or maybe, sprint out real quick and do an out route or a quick slant or something like that to get out. I mean, is there any credence to that idea?
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely, just because of where the holes are coming from on the Rams offensive line. So they still have the 2 tackles, and really what you're hoping to do when you keep your tight end in line is to help the tackle, either by getting a chip on the way out or by just clearly staying in and trying to handle the outside right end or left end or whatever. If anything, they might just keep running backs in more often to help out with the center and getting chips on defensive tackles and whatnot. I think, kind of to go along with what Adam was talking about earlier, they might want more running backs. They might want more wide receivers on the field in case of pressure, so they can get the ball out quicker. So that might keep Woods on the field in the slot.
Interesting.
So you can get a nice outlet.
All right.
If the Rams were struggling on the tackle side of things, I think that would be more likely that they would want more tight ends on the field. But they still have Havenstein and Whitworth out there.
Okay. No, I like that. And that helps out, because I couldn't find a counter argument to that. But now that you've put that in perspective as to where the tight ends would actually be blocking, if they still already have 2 tackles, intact tackles, and really their issues are more interior than exterior, then I guess there'd be less of a need to actually start pulling in, or like having more 2 tight end sets, or having a lesser need for somebody like Robert Woods to be out on the field. Because as of right now, I guess if you're looking at things from a redraft perspective, as folks start to get into that mode, as the season starts to ramp up, I mean, all 3 of the Rams wide receivers are almost going within a round of each other, like within picks of each other. And so if you're trying to invest in that offense, I mean, Jared Goff is essentially like he's supporting 3 wide receivers. I mean, 3 top tier wide receivers that you're going to have to spend a decent amount of draft capital on. So if there's not really too much of a concern, then it kind of seems like their ADP is almost worth it from a draft standpoint value.
Yeah. It's hard to choose those 3.
Oh yeah, they're all excellent receivers, and I guess the only concern is with Kupp because of the injury and how late it happened in the season. But still, I mean, if they're assuming they're healthy and assuming they're all out on the field, then this is an offense that you want to invest in, and these are receivers that you want to invest in just based off of their talent and of course the offensive situation. Mm-hmm. So let's move from a great offensive situation or an offensive line situation to, I guess, a lesser one. I mean, Seattle is known for having their poor offensive line, but at the same time, I mean, they're still able to get it done somehow. I guess Russell Wilson, I think the best line that I heard, I think it came from JJ Zacharyson, that Russell Wilson, he breaks math. Because there's really no reason as to why he's able to sustain such a ridiculous touchdown rate, like why his quarterback efficiency, like his adjusted yards per attempt, or like is one of the best ever. It doesn't make sense. And despite the fact that he was pretty much tethered to one of the most boring offensive coordinators in Brian Schottenheimer. I mean, they were still able to produce. So I guess we'll first look at the rushing production in looking at just what Chris Carson was able to do. I know we looked at Rashad Penny at in a previous show, but just looking at Chris Carson and that offensive line, I guess point out some of the differences that you see in Seattle than what we saw in LA.
Yeah, for sure. This play is kind of hilarious because all's well that ends well, but someone, be it the pulling left guard you see there, J.R. Sweezy, or Chris Carson, have missed their assignment here. And it all ends up fine, which is, it's all good. But you can see how he's pulling, and there's a gap. I think it's like the C gap here between the tackle and the tight end. And that should either be where the left guard is pulling into, or he is pulling correctly and Chris Carson's not following him. But luckily, this linebacker who's cheating up here runs directly into the gap, tap dances, and falls down. So, so I don't know exactly whose fault that is, but they're lucky that linebacker just tripped over his own dude. So either Carson was supposed to cut up in that hole, or Sweezy was supposed to go up in there and take care of that linebacker. Either way, they still get a good gain here.
But it seems like that was almost, systemic, or a common thing for most of Seattle, was that almost the second the ball is snapped, there was either a linebacker waiting in the gap, or past the gap into Russell Wilson's face, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they're clearly leaving him because you can see that right tackle there is going straight out to the left to seal off that linebacker. That was either Carson or Sweezy, but yeah, those are the reasons why they were not getting that many yards.
Yeah,
because they're built as a run blocking team.
I'm pretty sure that Chris Carson was supposed to go up the C gap there, following his lead blocker. Now the guard's responsibility would have been that middle linebacker cheated up and tripped on himself. But this is a good example of why we have the elusive rating and the yards after contact, because that is certainly Chris Carson going, oh shit.
Yeah.
getting
not going to go that way.
You could almost freeze frame it, look at his face, and probably see his eyes and go, I'm going to go where I'm not going to die.
So Trent Richardson would have gone right into that guy.
Oh, yeah. And he would have fallen over the guy falling
down like a torpedo.
Right.
Paralyzed this dude.
Yeah. Like, I don't understand. And for me, I guess the other thing when it comes to Seattle is that, we know, or at least the fantasy community, and I think just the NFL community at large, or fans of the NFL, they've recognized that Seattle has always had a poor line. I guess, and this is probably a rhetorical question, but I'm wondering why that hasn't been a larger priority for them in the draft. It just seems like any particular, player and or pick that they've made, they haven't been, these, I don't know, 5-star rated type recruits or anything like that. These high-end talents or prospects coming out of college. So I guess I don't understand why they don't wind up, actively going into trying to address that hole. Or I guess maybe they don't see it as a large priority because they have Russell Wilson under center. Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Well, they just would prefer to run the ball 45 times a game. So why protect your quarterback when you can just run it down their throats?
Exactly. And then hope for stuff like this.
Why do you pay him so much money? I think that for some reason they justify not having a great offensive line by paying Russell Wilson so much money. And then they can say, we're paying you all this money to make it happen, which is so dumb because he's so good. It's like, I don't know, people make the reference all the time, but it's like driving a Ferrari at 25 miles per hour. Why do you have a Ferrari? You'll get a Prius. It'll be more efficient. Why did you pay so much money for Russell Wilson? Just let him go to the Giants. Let him play quarterback, because Russell Wilson's just handing the ball off a million times, and then the other place he's just trying not to die.
I mean, why draw up plays for him when you can just make him play jackpot out there?
Just put him in the sand. Just draw plays in the sand in the huddle.
right?
I'm going to
just
throw
like-
as far as I can. You just get underneath it.
Yeah. I mean, because when you look at what he's had to do, I mean, it just, and this is a play. So looking at Russell Wilson, this is a play from 2017. And I will never forget like watching this play, because it's just like, I remember like almost calling this out in my head, like as I watched it, like he's going to do some sort of like ballerina move, and then he's going to throw it to somebody, and it's going to be a big play. And that's what wound up happening. And I'm wondering if Seattle saw so much of this that they just assumed that I honestly believe that they think that almost any quarterback can do this. It's just like, yeah, we'll just go ahead and let Russ do his thing, and we won't have to, pay him a bunch of money, or we don't have to, invest all that much in offensive line, because this is just what he does. And to me, it's just like, if you have one of the most efficient quarterbacks that can, one, make these, deep ball passes, accurate passes while on the run, but he can also rush for 600 yards, I guess, on a whim. Why not try to invest in the offensive line? Like, why play this game where he's forced to make these, feats of, acrobatic feats in order to generate, first downs? It seems like. I don't understand it.
This play is hilarious. I don't want to pick on Doug Baldwin because clearly he catches this ball and nearly scores a touchdown. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be down blocking and giving a crack on this outside linebacker here. And then
as he goes out, yeah.
And then he just doesn't. And then when he comes back around, he just slaps him and then runs out on this route. He's like, I don't really want to block you. He slaps him and runs out. I mean, it all ends up all fine and dandy. I feel like the offensive line did a good job here. I think this was an RPO, if I'm reading it right. They all blocked down to the right as if they're run blocking. And then near the end of this play, after Russell Wilson runs backwards 17 yards and then completes the pass anyways, you can still see a couple of dudes down here trying to keep their block up.
I still have no idea how he made this pass.
Now that you point that out, that is very accurate. Doug Baldwin should have been crack blocking hard, which would have allowed Russell Wilson to just bootleg out to the left.
Yeah,
the pocket was running it out, so it would have been fine. The person who made this amazing play, which for the listeners is the Doug Baldwin on the sideline play after Russell Wilson spun twice and pump faked, and everyone knows the play. Russell Wilson was actually supposed to have been down blocking, just like he said, Justin, and he didn't at all. And
he just slapped the dude and stood there.
He was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make an even bigger play.
Yeah. A lot of the pressure came from the guy that Russell Wilson didn't block, and then that Doug Baldwin didn't block, and then Doug Baldwin said, "Screw it," ran a random route, didn't even box out his guy. His guy just mistimes the jump, and Doug Baldwin completes the pass. This is insane.
Yeah, I don't get it. I think in this particular, I guess it's one of those plays where you want to blame the offensive line, because again, when we as fantasy managers, when we're just focused on the person with the ball, and then in Russell Wilson's case, I mean, 90% of the time he's the one doing the scrambling. You want to blame the offensive line for him doing that. But I guess in this particular case, it's really not the reason why, but it's all the things that are moving in concert, right? It's everything that has to be done in a play that we just kind of take. Well, one, we either don't know or we just kind of take for granted, right? Like we don't think about the additional blocks that have to be made in order for a play to actually proceed. So in this case, yeah, I mean, while it was one of those highlight plays, I think only one person could, well, I guess two people, because not too many people can actually make the catch that Baldwin makes, but only one person could actually probably complete this pass, like while on the run, twisting and like turning, completely turning your body. Like only he could have done that.
Off of the side of 1 foot.
Right. I mean, there's only
he was throwing it away. I don't know that he wasn't. I'm just saying he might have been throwing
the sideline.
It just doesn't make any sense. Like I have no idea like why they wouldn't invest more. Like, one, I guess in this particular play, it doesn't matter if they would have had like pretty much the offensive line from the LA Rams in front of them, because this comes down to like poor blocking on Baldwin's part. But back to what we were just discussing, if you have a guy that could do something like this, although the play probably would have been a little bit better, like had Baldwin actually, done the block and all that. But again, why not invest in a problem that you currently have when you know you have talent everywhere else? I guess I just don't get that.
Yeah.
Well, they invested in DK when they could have went offensive line, and I would say wide receiver was a pretty decent need. Even if you love Tyler Lockett, there wasn't really much behind Tyler Lockett. You got your Amari Darbo guys out there.
Jerron Brown.
Right. The list of people we don't care about can grow ever deeper. But I just think that, part of giving him that huge contract, they had to have discussed, like, hey, man, you're going to have to keep doing what you've been doing. And he was probably like, cool, just show me the money.
Yeah.
But going through this process live and talking about the film live is an interesting exercise because for years, like if you asked me to go back and describe this play, everyone knows the play, I would have said it was a broken blocking scheme. And it's just because there's guys in the backfield doesn't always mean that the offensive line did a poor job. Now, we have seen statistics that said that Seahawks offensive line has improved slightly. They're still not great. You would think they would be above average by now, having saved so much money on quarterback for 5 years, but here it's not even an offensive lineman. That's the problem. And hey, at least kudos to Doug Baldwin. He went out there and corrected his mistake.
You can kind of see the moment there too. He's like, well, I missed the block.
I should have done
I guess I'll run around.
No route whatsoever. Just like, I'll go here. And then you see him stop a few times because he thinks Russ is tackling. He's like, oh, nope.
I guess I'll catch this ball that's coming my way now. And then, oh, shit, I guess I need to run.
Should have been.
I don't get it. Like, I would be an offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. Like, that has to be one of the most, like, nerve-wracking jobs, like, ever. Especially when a play winds up breaking down and you're just sitting there having to watch because you have no idea, like, what's about to happen.
Hey, imagine excitement 4 times in 7 seconds.
Just right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, because yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, it's right here in the playbook. Thanks. Because if it's any of the old guys that I listed off earlier, most of those guys are going down. I mean, they'll either give themselves up or they're about to get sacked. So for them, they have like an extra like 4 to 5 seconds where they're just like staring and just like, this is not what I don't know. This is not in the playbook. I don't know how he does this. So it must be, I don't know. It has to be completely nerve-wracking for them in order to, one, come up with the plays, and two, when they break down like they normally do, see the scramble, the mind meld that he seemingly had like with Doug Baldwin in order to complete that pass. And with anybody else, I mean, Tyler Lockett, so on and so forth, which we're hoping that he can sustain that. But again, if he had a better line in front of them, in most cases, not all cases, like the one we just showed, that may or may not, really, stabilize his value, even though I think now, like Russ, like his value has pretty much plummeted in terms of like where he's at, like I guess comparative to the rest of the quarterbacks, because Seattle is now one of the more run-heavy teams, and with Schottenheimer like involved, we don't know if he's necessarily going to be that, a part of that high-flying, type of attack. And also without much of the rushing himself, I mean, he's not able to put up the same type of numbers that we were used to seeing like 2 to 3 years ago. So I just don't know if that's going to be the case. But Justin, I mean, thank you so much for coming and sitting down and talking with us tonight. And I think hopefully for the folks listening at home, they're able to really understand like how, I guess, the duality of the offensive production that we've been discussing with quarterbacks, with wide receivers, with running backs, and how all of that really comes down to the offensive line play and how critical it is to the production that we value so much in fantasy sports. But before we get you on out of here, man, we want to find out like what you've got working, what you've got cooking, and before the season gets going really in earnest over the next, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, what can we look forward to coming from you?
Yeah, I'll still be pushing some stuff out on 4for4 and over at SI Fantasy. I just had an article drop on Monday about boring fantasy football producers. And then the next couple of days, I'll have something out on 4for4 looking at offensive line play and what kind of running back values we can get behind those top 10 offensive lines. So that should be interesting. Outside of that, I'll be pushing stuff forward throughout the preseason and into the regular season. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, of course, man. And then Adam, before we get on here, do we have anything for the folks?
Yes, we're excited to get the DLF show back on the road. So that'll be coming up soon, and then we've got the Fantasy Football Expo where we'll be meeting up and seeing a lot of you people that are listening to us. So that's going to be fantastic as well. You can find me at APWILDE. You can find the show at Dynasty Manual. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff. We appreciate all that. And sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Chris, but it's actually morning and you have to go back to work.
I do have to go back to work, and that's part of the grind, folks. Sometimes we have to, fit these things into our schedules where we can. So yeah, I'm back off to work, and of course, yeah, Justin, where can we find you out on Twitter, man?
It is at Justin_Redwords.
All right. So for Justin, for Adam, I'm Chris Allen. I need to go back to work, but you can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. We thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you all next week.
Great show, gentlemen.
Oh yeah, thanks guys.
That is it. That went longer than I thought it would, surprisingly enough.
We should do more shows right after I wake up. That was fun.
That was
I don't even remember what I said.
Should have just been drinking instead.
It was great. It's fun. It's great. That's what we tell ourselves. If you don't listen to it, it didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
That is my second ever podcast, guys. Thank you.
You did awesome.
Great, man.
Thank you.
First one.
4 for 4 with Greg Smith talking about
sweet.
the rankings.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I haven't even been on that show yet. I've never asked or anything like that.
We'll go get them.
No, man.
If you don't ask, they can't tell you no.
That's true.
99 no's and 1 yes is still a yes. That's what.
I think that's how that works.
That's the old bar
Every
mantra.
day, if you could come on.
Quick question, Justin, are you going up to the expo, man? Will you be in town for that?
I'm thinking about it. Just heard about it on you guys' last episode. It's the 18th. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a Sunday. I don't know why he
Not
put
bad.
it on on a Sunday, but I guess they're doing.
Hall of Fame game.
Yeah, they're doing. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
is that the same day as the Hall of Fame game? The 18th? I thought that would have been earlier than that.
I'll have to check. It's not like I don't have the Google machine.
Oh yeah. Hall of Fame's the first preseason game, right? So that's probably like the 1st or 3rd or something of August. Oh, but anyways, yeah, probably. I'm gonna once I get back from this bachelor party, I'm probably change my availability at my brick and mortar job to just like 2 or 3 days a week. So
Gotcha.
I'm sure I'll be free.
Yeah. All right, because so it's gonna be like one hell of a weekend. So that the day beforehand, I'm picking Adam up from the airport, and then we're going down to Cincinnati for a brewing competition that Joey and I normally do.
Oh wow, sweet.
Yeah, so we'll be down there. It's going to be like a keg only, like brewing competition. So we'll be down there that evening, and then we're driving up Sunday morning, and then we'll be at the expo all day. So we'll have a booth, so you can come hang out with us there. I talked to Luis, and he sent like a bunch of 4 for 4 t-shirts that I can like pass out for free.
Hell yeah.
He sent I think 4 or 5 or something like that. I was hoping I could get a tracksuit or something, like one of the ones that
You can wear it at the expo.
oh hell yeah, but they didn't have one in my size that they could get made up. So I was
You
like,
have to get it custom printed.
heck yeah. Well, he said he still had like Ray-Bans tracksuit, but it was like much smaller. Like, he offered me that one, but like Chris is like way smaller than me, so that would not have worked, or at least it wouldn't have been all. That would have been. I wasn't gonna do that. Nah, man.
Did they make him send it back in with his papers? Like, if you're moving on, you gotta send the tracksuit back.
I don't know. I guess they must have I guess before he said he was going to, where did he go to? The Athletic, I think.
Or the
Action News.
Action. Yeah.
Action
For
Network.
Action Network.
Yeah. So before he left for that, I guess they didn't wind up sending it over to him. But
That dude's just like on ESPN every once in a while now, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
That's sweet.
Which is ridiculous.
Too bad.
If I watched
don't listen
ESPN,
to
I'd
ESPN anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I see people with ESPN on. I'm like, all right, I don't want to talk to you about sports.
Yeah. Which kind
Did
of
you watch Around the Horn today? No, I didn't watch fucking Around the Horn. What's wrong with you?
What am I, fucking 12? No, I didn't
Yeah.
watch
Yeah,
it on
no, I
the
didn't
board.
watch that. Like, no. Damn. But yeah, we'll be up there all day for that. So yeah, let me know or shoot me a text or something like that if you're gonna go.
Yeah, dude, it's not that far away. It's like an hour and a half for me.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's pretty close for you guys. I think it's
Mhm.
like 2.5 hours or something like
Yeah.
that. From
I've
Dayton.
also never been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Neither have I.
Me
Been
neither.
in Ohio for like 20 years.
Yeah, right.
Never been to Canton. Not a once.
Somebody's sweet.
Yeah. So we're definitely have to check it out.
Yeah,
All right,
sweet.
Jets.
I'll get a hold of you.
All right, fellas. I gotta run back to work. So
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'll see
All right,
you.
man. Catch you guys later.